I'm going to reveal some big and common growth hacking mistakes. The big one is defining your target market as the target customer. Your target market is not just the target customer. Target market consists of 5 different components: customers, collaborators, context, competitors, and company. These are strategic decisions. These are not just tactical ones. And the two that are the biggest opportunities from a growth hacking perspective are the collaborators and context. So if you're defining your target market as just the customers, you're missing out on the biggest growth hacking opportunities. So collaborators, these are the big partners, the big companies, the big retailers, the big influencers, the big sources of leverage that are going to empower you to grow extremely quickly without having been around for a long time and having a giant user base. So that is arguably the single most important source of growth hacking. The other is context. So these are things like environmental changes that are happening in the market that provide huge opportunities for you. So if something is trending, if there's going to be an abrupt change, you're in a favored position, especially if you're a smaller company, because you're able to satisfy whatever that changing need is based on those environmental conditions faster than incumbents are going to be able to, because large incumbents tend to move very slowly. The next is building scalable systems before first getting market feedback. So for example, you might get all excited about a partner program. Now, I'm huge on partnerships. I think it's one of the most undervalued sources of growth. However, if you haven't been able to develop some sort of pilot program with those partners that you're thinking about partnering with, you're not going to have enough information to invest in a partner program. And the partner program itself may fail. The other thing that you may find is that you don't actually need 100 partners. So why invest in this giant affiliate system if it just means you're going to need to manage relationships with all these tiny partners that are not going to bring in a lot of customers or not going to bring in a lot of leads? So instead of investing in something like a giant partner program, just build something that's not scalable at first, do it manually, do it one-to-one, do it through manual outreach, through email, through LinkedIn, etc. Get a pilot program going, get some feedback, and then later on, if you see that it's successful, if you see it's getting traction, then you can worry about it becoming scalable. Now, related to this topic of scalability is when companies invest in large capital sunk costs too early. Now, this might be a bit contradictory because earlier I was talking about how economies of scale are one of the big sources of growth hacking, and investing in large capital costs is one of the ways that you achieve economies of scale. But when you're too young, when you're not big enough, instead what you should be doing is borrowing leverage by working with companies that already have the scale, by working with the influencers that already have the clout, by working with PR agents who have connections to people that have a lot of visibility in your target market. So one example of this I find is there's this inherent idea, particularly with micro startups. Okay, there's a lot of content in this course that's going to be relevant to medium and large companies as well. But if we're talking about really tiny companies, one of the first things they think is, I need to spend thousands of dollars on a website. Let's say $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 on a website. You don't need a website to acquire customers. For example, in business to business, you could just launch an ad campaign on LinkedIn, a lead generation campaign where you don't send people to a website. All you do is you capture their information through a lead form on LinkedIn itself. You could send a cold email campaign just to start conversations. So it's excited to obsess over these ideas of having like a fancy website, this thing that is a bit of an ego boost, but you need to focus on the core of where the growth is coming from. The growth is not coming from your website. It's going to come from conversations with the sales team or it's going to come from people hitting that buy now button. And sometimes all that means is advertising, emails, phone calls, marketing systems that really don't have much to do with the website at all. And even if you do need a website, sometimes all it is a landing page, a one-page promo to sell your product or to generate leads. Okay, another thing, and I think this is particularly true with growth hackers who are already experimenting in the market. They self-identify as growth hackers. They obsess over attribution and analytics. This is a huge sin that a lot of marketers are falling under. And one of the main reasons for it is that it gives marketers credibility, especially when they're working with CFOs and CEOs who want to see that, okay, there's a clear ROI, there's a clear financial impact here. But the problem is that a lot of the growth hacking methods that produce the biggest impact are not going to be ones that are easy to measure and be able to attribute things like lead generation to. So often what people end up doing is they end up focusing on all these tactics that are easy to attribute and easy to measure, but really don't produce much impact. The impact is linear rather than exponential. Now, there's a whole series of reasons for this. One is that attribution tools out there are only able to measure things that are digital, that are online. And as we know, and as I'll talk about later on, word of mouth is mostly offline, and offline is inherently more difficult to measure. Now, there are certain tricks that you can use to measure them, but measurement's not really the focus. Okay, measurement is something you do after there are effects, but the focus initially is the causes. Okay, what is causing people to change their mind? What is getting them excited to use your product? Who is the person that's endorsing your product? So examples of this is podcasts. Podcasts are a great way to build excitement, awareness for your product, but they're also very difficult to measure. So often what we see is that in tactics where there is oversaturation, where there are too many companies using them, those are the very ones that are easiest to integrate with attribution tools. And those are the exact ones that you don't want to be using when you're a growth hacker. You want to be using the ones that other people are not using. And often those are going to be ones that are more difficult to measure. Okay, lastly, this is one of the big mistakes, obsessing over vanity metrics. And I'm going to focus here on business to business. We have here a typical marketing and sales funnel that business to business companies use. This is from Forrester Research. And often what marketers do is they become very obsessed over MQLs, so marketing qualified leads. I define these as people requesting demos or requesting sales conversations, perhaps people that are signing up for free trial. Now, often marketers will focus even earlier in the funnel on marketing captured leads or marketing engaged leads. So these are things like people who provide you their email address to download a white paper or to register for a webinar. If you obsess too much over these, what you're going to end up doing is what most business to business marketers do, which is produce tons of leads that never convert to customers. If only 1% of your so-called leads are converting to customers, you got to ask the question, was that even worth it? So instead, what you should be emphasizing is deeper into the funnel metrics. So things like sales qualified leads, things like pipeline revenue or sales qualified opportunities, and things like acquire customers. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you do need to focus on these top funnel metrics, okay? Particularly with product-led growth, where you're trying to get the user base as large as possible. But just be cautious and don't delude yourself into thinking that because you paid $20 for an MQL or an MEL or whatever, that's a predictor of a paying customer. Okay? Don't get too excited about vanity metrics. Make sure you're holding yourself accountable to the real metrics that matter.